Good afternoon. Welcome to the AI and Design Thinking Symposium here at the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. My name is Brittany Williams. I'm an associate clinical professor here in the architecture program, and I am the principal investigator on the grant team that's bringing you this symposium this afternoon, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Lindsay Knight and Michael Esbach. The emergence of generative AI is causing a major shift in architecture and design. As AI becomes part of the creative process, it is impacting all phases of design, from initial ideation to site analysis to code compliance to visualization. This technology is reshaping, or at least it has the potential to reshape, how architects and designers practice and educate. However, the adoption of these tools must be tempered by important questions surrounding generative AI, including ethics, authorship, environmental impact, and data privacy. This symposium is a place for us to collectively probe these ideas, both as a community and in the broader context of practice and design. It's also a place to elevate the research, testing, and conversations that have been happening as we explore the intersections of AI, teaching, and learning. Through our discussions this afternoon, we want to consider how AI might integrate into our design processes and how we should approach this tool in our classrooms and in the design studio. We want to discuss what's at stake for higher education and design pedagogy, and discuss what the future of design might look like for us all. Thanks.
Well, we're really excited to kick it off today. And by we, I mean the research team, Brittany, Michael, and I. We are all associate clinical professors in the architecture program, and we're all designers and researchers with practices of our own outside of the school as well. We've been working since early in this year on this project, so we're excited to share what we've been doing with you and bring two important voices together and expand our conversation that we've all been having. We're very excited to collaborate with three graduate research assistants this summer. Louisa, Paymon, and Sarah Jane worked with us, testing, researching, interviewing, and just talking about what this meant for our school and our studios all together. So are they here? If you're here, wave. Right, Paymon, Louisa, Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane here. Thanks, guys. Nice. Off to a good start. We were also, we received a grant from the university, from the TLTC, so we're grateful to their support, but also to the support we got from within our school, from Dean Dawn Jordan, Mohammed Garipour, Tara Burke, and others. So we've been really, I think, collaboratively working on this in our school and getting support and momentum. So we're grateful to now include everyone in this conversation together.
Hey, everyone. So I'll talk about what's been going on. And our work really exists in a larger context of an interest in AI and what it might mean for a whole range of different disciplines, and that's being explored at the larger university. I'm going to describe a little bit about what's going on at that scale a little bit further down the road. But we want to dig in for a minute and just talk about what we've been up to, what the AI in Architecture Research Group specifically has been engaged in here in the architecture program, especially through the lens of design thinking, but also tool research, interviews and conversations we've been conducting, and the production of the report that's in many of your hands right now. So first, just to start, using an image here by Cas Esbach to describe design thinking as really a non-linear, open-ended process that's indeterminate and iterative. And this kind of scribbled line here starts to speak to the idea of designing and design thinking as something that's recursive and cyclical and absolutely non-linear, but a process that gets more focused as you move down the line. And so that's the kind of framework that we've been considering, is how is it that AI specifically can engage this notion of design thinking in which we are all engaged as designers. And so we went about it over the summer with our three aforementioned research assistants by engaging with a whole range of different tools, trying to understand the state of play about how AI is integrated in both practice and in academia at this moment. We were looking at Stable Diffusion and LookX and Midjourney and a whole range of other tools and just experimenting with them. We were at play. We built out a massive mural board covered with notes and images and ideas and prompts as we tried to understand the parameters and the range and the limits of the software as well. So it was hugely instructive and giving us a sense of what's being made and how it's being made and what those processes might look like. As we did that work, we were also reaching out to academics, to practitioners, local and international, to get a sense of how they're engaging with AI in practice and how they use it in their design thinking. So some folks, in some cases, like Kitty Shilton from the College of Information here, not a practitioner, but somebody deeply engaged in AI. But other folks, including Austin Raymond and others who are local at local practices, but deeply engaged in AI through research at their own firms. And then we had two really great conversations with Cas Esbach and Curry Hackett. And Cas and Curry are here today to expand more on their work and their thinking on AI. So we're really grateful to them, and we'll introduce them and hear from them a little bit later down the line. So these conversations and interviews, many of which you can find in the report in your hands again, helped us understand, again, the state of play of AI. And then lastly, yes, it's the report itself. All of that kind of research and thinking, the interviews, the conversations all came together into a report that was always intended to be placed in students' hands as they were engaging with AI. For some people, it was their first engagement with AI, and we thought it's responsible and maybe even ethical to provide a grounding of understanding of AI rather than just dive in and do whatever with the tool, but to really understand what it is, what its biases are, who's using it and why, what its limitations are. And so all of these questions around ethics and practice and the question of how it's engaged in design are explored in this, what we were thinking of as a primer. So I'll continue with what's going on. So now that was the summer. Now we're here in the middle of the fall semester, and what we've been doing this semester, as many of you in the room know, we launched two modules, and we asked students in 401 and Architecture 403 undergraduate design studios to engage with us in a range of exercises and practices. And our thinking about how to engage pedagogy here at the University of Maryland was not to couch AI as a really just a standalone tool, but something that might be embedded in our existing practices and our existing ways of thinking, so that it enriches modes of design that are already in play, and it's not necessarily a replacement. So we've come to understand how AI can accelerate design thinking, how it certainly affects the idea of iteration and enables rapid iteration. But the pedagogy development really occurred with a range with our GAs testing ideas, with the three of us kind of working through multiple exercises and trying to figure out how can we bring 150 students into the world of AI responsibly and also productively. These are images for some of that work, and you can see in the bottom left and upper right some of the products of that we'll get into a little bit further down the line. But it was a fun a series of weeks, 2 weeks in total, where there was kind of full engagement with a whole range of students, wallpapering the great space with amazing images and tons of iteration and thinking. So in that way, it felt successful. And so we're going to dig in more into the pedagogy and our thinking a little bit down the line. But let me give you a sense of where we're headed this afternoon. In a minute, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Cas Esbach of MVRDV, and he's going to tell us about his practice. I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. Following that, we're going to talk about the integration of AI at UMD Architecture. We'll have a little break after that. And then we'll come back and Curry Hackett will take the stage and speak to us about his work. We're super excited about that. Then for about 40 minutes, there'll be a moderated discussion between Cas and Curry, and they'll sit down with Lindsay here, discuss their work. We'll see what kinds of overlaps and even some conflicts might come up. Who knows? Who knows where it's going to go? And then following that, of course, we're really excited to host a reception. And in the great space, we've got posters up from staff, from faculty, from students who are all engaged in AI in different ways. And those authors will be there to kind of speak to that work while we mingle and hang out. So that's coming here at the end of the day. Now, let me tarry no further and introduce Cas Esbach. Cas is a project leader and licensed architect in MVRDV's Rotterdam office. And he's been a part of the firm since 2018, spearheading a diverse array of projects all across the globe. Most notably, he's worked on the Shenzhen Terraces in Shenzhen, Tripoli Park in Amsterdam, and the Valley in Amsterdam as well. Ranging from city block development and large-scale cultural campuses to university buildings, high-rise towers, and housing, the designs exemplify a concept-driven and vision-focused approach. Cas prioritizes efficiency, pushing boundaries, forward-thinking methods, and research-driven conceptual thinking in his work, while actively engaging AI workflows in the design process to enhance creativity and efficiency. He's a licensed architect. He holds a bachelor and master degree from TU Delft. And prior to joining MVRDV, he worked at a number of firms, including Bjarke Ingels Group, and he's taught at the TU Delft as well. I'll also say, just on a personal note, the work of MVRDV has been a touchstone for me since I was a young architect in undergrad. It's amazing work, cutting edge, and has been for so many years. I stepped into my first building, MVRDV building this summer, which was the Art Depot. And it took my breath away. My brain was just exploding because it was the concept and the typology and the architecture itself was extraordinary. It was the Art Depot. And then I happened to drive by later by the Valley in Amsterdam and also took my breath away. I couldn't imagine what I was looking at. The invention, the inventiveness of the housing was extraordinary. So we are absolutely thrilled that a project leader and a leader, I would say an international thought leader in AI is here to talk with us from MVRDV. Thank you, Cas. Kenny, would you help? Are you sure?
Yeah. Thanks for that introduction. Super nice to hear. And I'm also happy I'm wearing the same jacket, which is also great. Yeah, you know, it's really me now. I've kind of come here, been invited here, which is really great and really fun. Opportunity to kind of talk about AI and architecture and kind of that relationship. But to kind of understand that, I want to first dive into what MVRDV is, what our firm is, and then a few projects that kind of hit on and kind of elaborate on the way that we approach design. And then you can kind of understand how the AI kind of works into that workflow, I guess. So a little backstory, I'm here representing MVRDV. MVRDV stands for Winnie Maas, Jacob van Rijs, and Nathalie de Vries. And those are our founding partners or the thought leaders, which is a nice word of the office. But the office is larger. It's made up of 350 people. Architects, designers, urbanists, computational specialists, sustainability people, and they all kind of come together in a few offices all over the world, in Rotterdam, Paris, Berlin, New York, and Shanghai. And within that firm, I am a project leader. And what a project leader means is that I'm the person in the middle. When everything goes wrong, I get called. I'm right in between the advisors, the team, the budget, the client, the director, and the partner, and trying to make sure that everything kind of stays on track and we keep our architectural and how do I say this nicely, our design ambition without losing sight of everything else that's important, which is also having a happy team, for example. And though that kind of feels like a thankless job some days, like maybe this morning even, but I won't. It is also a cool job where I'm lucky to be involved with some extremely impressive projects that have great effects on people, which is nice. And MVRDV is able to do that because MVRDV's architectural approach is based in research. And this is our first meter of books where we kind of line them up, which is great to see. And unlike, or what even is more strong about it is that this research here, a set of books done with the TU Delft over a couple of years, result in really exciting projects. So each project in itself is based on and really grabs onto this like research-driven approach. Through research, we offer radical solutions to well-defined questions. Like here, how can we be more sustainable? Like for the matrix building. So now I'm just going to go into a few projects, just so you know. So how can we be more sustainable? This is arguably a more boring building, but fully mapped out with a full material passport, so it can be completely demounted and rebuilt somewhere else. How can we be more prototypical? Like here for the Tiffany facade, where we, inspired by coral reefs, kind of took a bunch of ocean-bound plastic and recycled that into this 3D printing material, which then references the waves and the ocean and the coral patterns, but puts it within this Tiffany blue. How can we be more human? Like here with the Future Towers in India, where we were asked to create this incredible mass of housing, but then to not forget that we create for human beings. We created separate spaces for people to come together or people to shoot golf balls into the courtyard. How can we be more humorous? Like here in the Didden Village, where we kind of questioned the convention of extending a building in the same style, but let's just do it completely different. Why not? And it creates this, incredibly attractive space where this is actually a grown adult, but because of the space shape, she looks very small, which is kind of funny. How can we be more innovative? Like here for Bulgari, where we crushed up a bunch of champagne bottles, which then resulted in this beautiful facades type, which then gets lit by the back, which is just great to see. And how can we, I think I missed the slide here, but that's fine. How can we be more protective? Like here, where we were asked to kind of innovate on this existing building, which is the one on the left, and continue its like legacy. It's an old Dutch architect, actually, so sorry about that. How can we be more contextual? Like here with the Schijndel glass farm, where we kind of analyzed and looked into what the archetypical farmhouse is in the Netherlands, blew it up to 200% and rebuilt it back in glass. How can we be less iconic? I think this is a nice question to ask, because we were asked to continue. This is the depot that he was talking about. We were asked to add another icon to Rotterdam, a city surrounded by icons. So instead of doing that, we created one which in its facade actually becomes all of the icons, which I thought was very poetic. How can we be more adaptive? Like here with the Wego houses, a result of a research done with the TU Delft, where each apartment is shaped by the user's own identity in a way. So I'll dive into this one a little bit more. How can we be more protective? So here in Amsterdam, we were asked to react to this existing set of buildings on the left, which were designed by Allo van Eyck, probably the most good-looking, handsome architect in the world. And he's actually a very important architect in the Netherlands, because he's famous for this building, the Burger Racehouse, but especially the way that he deals with the human scale, and despite using quite harsh materials, still inviting play and stuff like that. So he's very important to us in the Netherlands. And on the left, you see his Burger Racehouse, which then on the right is his new building, the Tripolis. So it was actually falling into disrepair. And then what he did is he made a deal with the government, and he said, what if I just use the front garden to make this really corporate office? We'll build that, and then that'll generate revenue so we can upkeep the building on the left. And then he got approval for it, and he went hard on it, and he really did his best to make this very corporate building, but he wasn't so great at it. So actually every facade rotates 7 degrees, and every floor plate becomes 2 centimeters bigger. So it created this completely fun and impressive floor plate for us, but for completely unrentable. So it sat empty for most of its lifetime. And then we were actually challenged to and to kind of find a way to bring back life to it. And we were allowed to keep 50% of it, which could have also been the bottom 50, all the parking, and demolish the buildings completely. But this felt like the worst way to deal with such an important building. So what we did first was start to protect it. We created a screen towards the road, offset it for optimal efficiency. You know, you have a desk, a floor, what do you call it? A desk, a corridor, a central zone where you can kind of do a coffee, and then another corridor, another desk. So super generic and optimized floor plan, which then created this building, which kind of reacts fully because we had a 4-meter offset of the old building. So it's all about that in-between space, which we created and celebrated, and a little bit of green. But here you kind of see that difference. So because of all of these crazy designs that Aldo van Eyck did, which was really important to him, and because we loved it so much and really tried to understand it, our building is a result of his imprint in a way. I guess zero designed by us and all by him, which is very respectful. But when you look at the building, and maybe you could doubt that in a way, but it is interesting to see that we kind of envelop and protect the old building, creating these, you know, gorgeous in-between spaces, especially when you go in through the building. You can see that we tried to keep all of the elements that made his design so specific. So you still have that 2-centimeter offset. You still have his little gutter system. So everything is in there and still working in a way. And what was really nice is that the building, even before finishing, was then rented out to Uber completely. So it's a way to really bring it back to life, also in like the practical commercial sense of architecture, which I think is nice. Beautiful, right? What's also cool to see is that these little things on the top, we completely demolished them and rebuilt them, but they were also part of this 4-meter offset. So they would offset outwards 4 meters in 3 dimensions, which means that sometimes on the inside of the building, when one of the roofs of the thing would be offset, it cut through the floors, something we fought really hard for to get in. But so it's this conceptual driven approach where we really stay really hard on it, which maybe doesn't make sense until you know, it gives a space that you can understand and you feel some connection to the heritage. And this is also just a great detail because it's where the old and the new building come together. And though it looks very simple, and in your Rhino models as students, it is very simple, but the reality is that sometimes you're cutting a window with this new glass frame. So we had to create this whole system that kind of connected that, which was a lot of fun. Another project where we really asked to deal with heritage and how do we respectfully deal with heritage was the Hills of Iași. We're in Romania, the second city we're in Iași, the second city of Romania. We were asked to do a housing project, but right in the middle of the city, right next to the palace, on the right side, you see a little empty spot there. We were asked to design something. So how can you add something respectfully without kind of obstructing and destroying this beautiful heritage? So first thing we did, which, oh, you guys can see it quite well, is kind of put what we were allowed to build in the site and evaluate it. And we saw actually, if we do what we were asked to do, we would destroy this heritage and our addition would be a destructive action instead of something that embraced and loved it. So we have to do a design in a different way. Again, kind of without designing, which is kind of a funny theme in the projects I've worked on. But so this is the starting mass, our allowed building site. And the first thing we do is we bow down to the context. And then, skip the step, we kind of cut away for the palace, cut away for the church, cut away for the cathedral. And then the building is completely a result of the contextual inputs. We've done almost nothing to it until this point. We've just understood and respected the surroundings. And then we materialize it in a way that kind of accented that design decision. And what you get is a building that fully embraces the context and would invite you to walk through and kind of celebrates that. And though despite when you zoom in on it, it might feel quite intense and like a big adjustment, once you zoom out and you see it within the context, it seems to fit in a way. And here, these are kind of nice little additions that we added in was the views, what you would experience it as you're walking around, actually exploring the city, taking the pictures we took when we started, you know, so. And you see our building doesn't change the city that much. I don't know if you can even find it in this picture. So I think that's just a nice, and it's also very beautiful, I think. And here the peak language, which is a result of zero design, that completely matches the context. The fourth quadrant, another project where we had to deal with history. So it's kind of, now that I'm saying this out loud, there's a lot of thoughts about history. So how do we protect? How do we contextualize our building? Or how do we celebrate the past in a way? I think that's where this one is about more. So in Prague, where I grew up, this is actually where the bus stop used to be, where right on the left top side here, where I used to stand every day. But that's it was an empty field, completely desolate, and nothing happened there. And we were, though it wasn't this beautiful neighborhood with a lot of history and a beautiful architectural language, that when we were asked to do something for this, we kind of were like, what has happened to this place? Why is it completely empty and forgotten? And actually it wasn't forgotten or empty in a way as much as it was unfinished, because Antonin Engel, an earlier urbanist from the area, had designed this great old building for it. Not old in his day, for sure, but and though you could be critical on it now, his design sensibilities were fine and correct in a way. His long access with hugely functional buildings, a lot of storytelling about dramatic lines of sight and connections, and monumentalness was really something that he loved. And we kind of fell in love with it and asked ourselves, how can we actually embrace his vision for the past, for that area, and use that as a starting off point for us? Through a bit of sketching and AI dreaming, we got to the point that we wanted to reduce his facade down to the bare essentials. Starting with his original design, we then carved out, removed things, accented cornices, emphasized things, made it structurally sound, adjusted it to make it viable for the apartments and offices behind it also, continued it up over the roof and kind of punched holes into it, creating then kind of different conditions in relationship to where we placed, let's say, the veil or the reference to the past into in relationship to our new addition, which are super sustainable, very optimized, well built, so very functional back with a very outspoken, identity-driven front. Looking at our site, okay, we want to continue Antonin. We decided, and we loved some of the trees which are on the site. We created this as our base outline, and everything we had to do had to be within this. And there comes some functional building, which is super submissive to the fact that we then rebuild Antonin completely and creating this completely insane building, which in a way almost feels like a terrace in Paris because of its way of celebrating the past and accepting what was designed for that area. But it is completely new. And here on the right, a university building. So there you see that the veil gets so thin that the mullions of the veil actually become glass. And on the left, you see that the veil and the building are so far apart that there's so much space that you can put a park in there. And so specifically this distance, which was like the whole celebration, this project, where when you're in an apartment, you can feel Antonin's vision on there, or when you're sitting outside with your baby or something, or when you're up on the roof doing your yoga, or when you're shopping. It's always this interaction moment and this distance, this difference in distances, which became the core of the project and also fits very well within the context. The next project, Valley. I think this one, to explain this project better, and I thought was also great for you guys to see as students, is the way that the Valley is kind of bound and anchored in architectural research. So starting with one of the first books we did with the Y Factory, Porosity, we started with the notion of sustainability and how do you create a sustainable future? Because if we all live like you guys live with big Jeeps and trucks, we'd need about 12 and a half, right? We'd have to, I had to update this slide because when I tell this story in the Netherlands, it's only 4 planets, just so you're aware. So we need 12.3 planets, actually. So the biggest solution we saw is density. And it seems to be it's also a big foundation of the office is density. But density always seems to come at the sacrifice of architectural quality. Because as cities try to develop quick, like here you see in Beijing, in about 8 years, we go from this old structure to this completely new architecture. Or here in Shanghai from 2000 to 2005, we're building so fast that architecture suffers. And architecture loses any sense of location or identity. And though maybe you can say to yourself, oh, who cares, doesn't matter. It completely changes the way you live, because when the outside is the same, all at once the inside also seems to be the same. So all of these people all over the world live in almost the same apartment, which is insane to me to think about that. So what do we do then? Let's start with the generic skyscraper tower. And I asked somebody, where would you want to live? Maybe you'd want to live on the top floor, I'm guessing. Best views, right? But the moment we change something, add a little bit of fun or architecture, that changes where you want to live. You want to live with the panorama view, or maybe you want the one above it with the extra large green terrace overlooking the city. And using that idea and thought process and continuing it every time, one step on another step on another step, and again and doing it more and more. And in collaboration with Lego, I think we created all of this and create cool pictures with mirrors. So it looks like there's way more models than there are, but it is very cool. You start to kind of test this notion of creating identity through kind of, architectural intervention, I guess. And then through some of the really talented people in our office, the next studio, and in collaboration with the TU Delft, we try to pull it back into reality. So through analysis and scripting, we kind of took these key 6 or 9, or you'll see the picture later, maybe it was 12 models, and pulled them into reality and kind of bringing them to a scale and a size that would get you to question, what does this mean architecturally in a way? How can we draw inspiration from this? So it kind of moves away from just this 2D image and becomes something real that you can interact and question. Okay, research 1 done. Research 2, green dip. Another way to deal with sustainability has to do with building within the context that you exist in. And one of the contexts which is often forgotten or kind of underappreciated is this biome context. So in the world you live in a specific biome, and that biome comes with a specific set of plants and animals. And we often forget what that is. So what we did is we dove into all these different biomes and listed out all of the trees and plants that we could find to give us an understanding. And here, I'll just show it. We also kind of listed out the requirements for each of these. What size does it need to be? How much ground do you need? Is it affected by light? Is it toxic for the humans around it? Does it smell bad? And it kind of gives you a catalog of plants that you can pull from in creating something new. So then re-looking at this generic typologies which fill our world, we could then imagine a future which is more green and more biome contextual, I would say. Changing these skylines, which we're so kind of accustomed to and completely okay with, into something more contextual, into something which fits in the place that you're building it, which we kind of forget. Here in Knasa, I think one of the most polluted areas of the world can become something like this. And though it's, as students, you may think, what the hell, this is so crazy. It doesn't make any sense. You just Photoshop some trees on it. Yes, I know, we did. But it can become a reality too, in a way. And that's kind of where the Valley comes in, because the Valley was a competition we did for the South Axis, which is right here. So this is Amsterdam. That's where you visited, if you visited. And this is the financial district where all of the skyscrapers and big named architecture people come to build something new. And right on the head of the South Axis area sits this plot, which is the King plot. And there was a big competition. A lot of people wrote in, and I will show you our approach for it. And I hope also explain why we won. So this is kind of what we were allowed to build, and then we optimized it, made it super functional, and it kind of gave us this massing. And then the financial district, you have to understand, is this, as you can imagine, is this big. It's just filled with big glass boxes along one big, kind of organized around one metro stop, which is a bit intense and horrible. It doesn't feel very human, but something we should be aware of and respect. So our building is let's say, contextual in its outside appearance. And then thinking about that first study, the research we did, porosity, and thinking about the green dip, like keeping those in our back of our mind, we wanted to create a place where people can come home and think, oh, that's where I live, that's my apartment, or that's my terrace, and that, you know, there's an identity aspect to it. So using things like sun, noise, wind, and the views that we wanted to create, we started carving out and chiseling away and cutting out. And I think there's probably better words for this in English, but in a way we use kind of the impact and the input from the surroundings to carve away and create this massing, which then is programmed, housing at the top, commercial plinth at the bottom, which then could be way higher because as you carve out, you also create accessibility throughout the building. And then you get this beautiful plinth. And then using that carve out language, we also defined this interior courtyard area, which you can enter. And then thinking back to our green dip study, if you all remember, 5 minutes ago, we, together with Pete Adolf, created a planting plan, which then fit within our biome, but also accented this new natural landscape that we created. So going down from smaller plants all the way up to larger trees. And then as you get above the fake tree line, which we created, you kind of enter this area with flowers, and it's beautifully iconic and dramatic. And it gave us this render, which when we sent it in, we got a call. And they asked us, can you actually build this? And we said, yeah, for sure, we can do it. That's no problem. We were really confident, and we were, of course, but it's an extreme challenge. And then it was published, and then websites started publishing about it, like MVRDV is lying with renders. I think you can even find it. It's on failedarchitecture.com, where they kind of assume that that we sell something which we can never make into a reality. But we did make it, and it's better than the render, I would say. So here, just kind of summarizing that it's all about this push and pull, and because when you make a building real, you need to think about things like gravity, and as you all know. So we kind of had set these key rules. So I think you have about 2.5 meters to push in, and you had about 4 meters to push out maximum because of the overhangs that we could create. And then in collaboration with our client and our structural engineer, we had 12 moments that we could add a special onto the building, which is something that goes beyond the rules that we had set. So that's a steel structure kind of added onto it. And these were used then to create like optimized views and extra large terraces. So it creates a lot of quality. And our units had to be organized in a way that you don't invade somebody else's privacy. That was also done through programming, making sure that bedrooms and living rooms don't really look into each other, or at least don't look into your neighbor's bedroom, which is very important. And then made sure that the shape that is kind of hugging or making sure that the apartments still have a lot of quality despite being in such an intense noise polluted because of the highway, and very windy because there's nothing to the south of it actually, or the east of it. So there's a lot of wind coming through there. So you kind of organize all of that, and you create a set of different identities and apartments throughout the whole building. But making it a reality is, again, a huge challenge, especially since every facade is differently oriented. We need to make sure that we have enough daylight and all of that stuff. So then through scripting and, this new design technologies and completely embracing them, we're able to kind of evaluate and start testing. And testing was like our big thing, testing all these different options and evaluating them constantly to make sure that that we're creating an apartment set which worked for us. And then you tell me which one you pick finally. It's about to appear. The deep green one, of course, that's the best. But it just goes to show how much work goes into bringing something from this render, this idea, into a reality. And then more work as you're trying to make sure that each apartment fits the requirements of being a human, the kitchen, a bedroom, all of that type of stuff. And it's also really fun now to see on TikTok because a lot of influencers are moving in. So they're all filming their move-in day and what furniture they're ordering. And then, I ordered, my bed was too wide. So they had to, get a different one. So it's very funny that you see it's like it becomes like a thing to move into this building, which is really fun. And then thinking back to our biomes thing, working with Piet Oudhof, who did the High Line in New York, which I'm sure you're all aware of. We created this amazing planting plan, and also kind of to show you guys that not all architecture is all scripts and all of that, because he just came in and gave us these sketches, and that's what we had to deal with, and that was it. No renders, no impressions. It was a set of images and beautiful, intricate drawings that he did for us. And then we created this to kind of, hey, this is the idea, right? We're going from low all the way up to high to the top. Here are the floor plans with just nice to see since you're all architects, right? It's not just only shiny pictures, but really functionally organized so that our backside, which is on the water, has all the infrastructure, let's say. And then you have these really fun and activated plinths with small entrances to the bike parking. And then as you move up, because you have to walk up a staircase or go up an escalator to get into your lobby space, you have this hugely public lobby space, which is also carved out of the rock. And then moving up even more, you see this carve out the walkway over top of the roof, which connects two sides to each other and allows for commercial program to be all the way up to the 5th floor, which is completely unheard of in the Netherlands, actually. I think above 2, they think you're crazy. I'm sure here as well, actually, seeing how horizontal it is. But it's just to think about how much, so we created this whole design language, and then how much more exciting and inviting and all the extra things that come out of it is just, I think it's spectacular. And then here we go up, here you see one of the exceptions on the, see, it's just little crazy little living room, which is great. You go up higher. And then in 2017, we started building, which was a huge moment for us. And then what you do first in the design process is you build a small mock-up, which is like a small portion of the building, and you evaluate on that. So, so just remember our concept. We started with this glass box, right? And we started to carve away at it to create this identity. And then using that thought process, we evaluate this mock-up to see if it adheres to our initial ambitions. And I'm saying this because it was so nice with the students from Ken, who's there, was because that's just something, a nice way to think about it. So you set up your ambitions, and then you use that to evaluate everything down to the last detail. And then when you look at this, you start to think, oh, these gray window frames, they suck. They don't fit our concept. They're not part of this big rock thing, and they're jumping out too much. And the black one, so Winnie actually taped it with black tape, also doesn't work. So it's just fun to see. And then we started thinking, would a carved-out rock actually have this repeating pattern in it? No, it's not natural at all. So it helps to really build these things and test them. And what happens then is the window frames become brown, the same color as the stone. And the stones, we had to build a whole script for it with our scripting team, so that from the quarry, they're cut out in 12 different sizes and labeled in a way that the builders can build it accurately or like in order. And if they do it correctly, you won't see a repeating stone pattern anywhere on the building, which is a huge feat for our ambition to keep our concept as pure as it is. And it's so easy not to do it, which I think that's what speaks to why I like MVRDV. Also, the limits of the script is fun to see, that sometimes, you have this weird little point thing, which then, you don't want in your building, because it's kind of, so the script at some point turns into manual labor for some people. And I think this one is also great to see. But I only have 10 minutes, so I'll keep going because time is, I have to be really tight on time. Here we see somebody doing a job I could never do, which is building the green up, which he likes it, I guess. And here you see the building as it's starting to be completed. Just keep an eye on the identity of the different spaces of each apartment and see how people, here you enter the building, and as you're standing in the middle, which any of you guys can go to, you start to look up into this pond area, which we created with these glass beams. And when the rain falls and fills up with water, you see this beautiful, like shimmering effect as you look up at the tower. And here, beautiful. It's so boring, but also so incredibly hard. And so something we're so proud of that I like to put this image in. And here are some beautiful staged images of a child running. And it just kind of gets the vibe of the project. It is child friendly. Everybody can go there. It's completely accessible. And here, this is also so fun, is that though you can have this great concept and put in so much effort and have so many well-known people working on it, people will still put little pots next to your big, beautiful plants, which is just so funny and so ridiculous to me. But it's also something you have to let go of. And it shows that there is space for people to kind of add their own identity to it. And they put this weird square thing in their crazy, it's so weird, but so fine, I guess. Like, I'm not critical on it, but I would never do it like this. But you see this other lady with this beautiful, really long terrace, and then she sits all the way in the corner, which is so funny to see. And here you see, great, right? And then, oh yeah, here another one where you have your great concept, so powerful in the glass financial hell. We have this oasis and it's carved out. And then our client puts it in the in the hills of Thailand or something. Just this is the sale image that they used in the video on the site. So it's also very funny. They completely pulled it out of the context, which is like the starting point of our concept, which is just fun to see. So the question that you ask yourself as an architect becomes the invitation to create. And the answer that you create in your projects are an opportunity to make a statement and really say something. And that's what all your projects should be doing, I think. And as we're kind of growing and in a changing world, the tools that we use to kind of find these answers are constantly evolving. And we have to evolve with them as we've gone from the drawing table to CAD to more CAD or Revit and Grasshopper. And AI kind of sees to be the next step in this development. And that's why it's also so important that we, not as practice, but also in research and teaching, all need to be working on this at the same time. Because let's say all of these projects that I've shown you, design processes and design technology has been extremely important, whether scripting the facades or the openings or the light that's allowed to come in. So it's just part of that, our ability to create more and more exciting things, which fit our vision. So generally in the world, AI is a big discussion. People hate it, people love it. And as the reality is, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And this is the great sketch, which I just stole from Google somewhere. But it is, in a way, I will just kind of share a few thoughts on where we can integrate AI right now. It's also kind of a starting point that I want you guys to react on later and tell us if it's possible, if it is right or if it's wrong, because we're working on this all together. In ideation, AI can have a role in knowledge sharing and communication, in iterative design tasks, in fabrication and visualization. These are slightly different because it's changing so fast. So let's run into ideation. Ideation is kind of your let's see, this is a video. Oh, yeah. So I think AI tools are completely unbeatable in the way that they're able to visualize and kind of clarify the ideas you have quickly, but they suffer from extremely unseen and unobservable kind of limits on your vision because these models are all working in a specific way. They're trained on images, and those images are kind of tagged with text. So here you can kind of see an image and a text. And then as you kind of generate something, you start with this random noise and it generates into a clear image. And it's drawing based on those, let's say, that background knowledge of images. I don't know if that's clear for you guys. So that's how it kind of creates a new image. So it's extremely limited by the way that you're writing your prompts, because they define the images that you're kind of querying in your generation process. It's also really limited by the people who select the images and write the prompts, which then you can pull from, which kind of really define the way you can generate. So let's say in the basis, it's about deliberate prompting. I think that's going to be the foundation in an architectural AI integrated process, where here I just name a few key aspects. I also showed the students from Kevin yesterday. I think if you hold on to these, at least the way you prompt and what you create is very much in your control. Because this is the fun example where we're sitting in the train, 15 minutes till we arrive, and we need to kind of clarify this concept for one of our clients. And all we have before getting there is this image, which is the idea of it's a housing building sitting on water, and it will pump up the water of the lake and use that to cool the facade down in the summer. So you start by creating an active, deliberate prompt, and then adjusting it slightly this way, that way. And finally, you reach an image where you think, okay, that can clarify my concept. But then with a little bit of Photoshop, and then using two images in collaboration, all at once able to communicate that really simple sketch in a way that anybody can understand. So in the process of ideation and communication of your ideas, this AI is like incredibly powerful. And here, you know, like the contrast with the desert or something funky or natural, I don't know. It just shows what everything is possible. And it's good for us to be in control as architects. And that's why we are always working on using LoRa's or low rank adaptations on top of these generation processes in a way. So here we created one based on vernacular architecture, using that to kind of change our generations from something boring or fine, not boring maybe, to something more vernacularly inspired or kind of, you know, where you don't lose all of this great architecture in your generation. So yeah, I'm trying to hurry up here. Sorry, guys. So here you kind of see ideation is a key part of the architecture process where AI can help. Some slides are through each other. I'm so sorry about that. I was messing it up this morning, so it's completely my mistake. And here you see we created specific LoRa's for things like our valley building or more inspired or trained on the images and our all our diagrams, which are so MVRDV, trying to use that on images. Knowledge dissemination is such a key aspect of our firm. Having grown so much to 350 people from 3, it's really important that everybody has access to and is able to understand the way that we design and the way that we think. So here in collaboration with Next, which are kind of our scripting studio, and using AI ways of seeing, we kind of able to organize and evaluate the first 200 projects that we did. And we kind of gave it access to all of our images of our server, which then you can sort on things like drawing. And then you can also sort it as a way to kind of look back at how buildings were created. Like here, the Markthal in its first iterations, which then as you scroll through time, you can start to see it become a reality. Also, we're training AI chatbot tools to kind of help us with things like code knowledge, or which is fun that people then start to ask the code the really important questions like, can I sleep in my kitchen or can I cook in the bedroom? Which it's strange, but it's important to understand that now through these AI tools, we can interact with these big knowledge bases like a human being, which is really good. Communication, another topic that AI can be powerful in, is that we're able to bring back tools which have in some way lost relevancy in our post-COVID world. Most of my meetings are digital, and I'm not going to be holding up my blue foam model for the camera like this, so nobody's able to see it. But now we're able to kind of translate our blue foam models or ideas into a reality that is communicatable and inspiring. And we're able to do that live, because this is kind of created by Freddie, which is one of those really great AI experts within our office, where kind of have these live images where now we're able to do these design processes which are kind of forgotten or less usable in our current world, but now bring them into the now, allowing us to play with foam blocks again. Iterative design tasks have become very easy. Kind of skip through this because I think we all get it. And finally, a new kind of topic which I'm super interested in, and we are super interested in as an office, is fabrication, is bringing the 2D into the 3D. So here, using our LoRa's, our own models, we're able to kind of translate a prompt into an image, which then also becomes a 3D model and possibly a building in the future. But it's also very ugly, but it is interesting to show, this is really on the edge of what we can do right now. And we're all aware that it's not there yet. But if we're not embracing it and not pushing for it, all collectively will never get there, you know, to a point that we can actually integrate it. Ugly, ugly, especially complex forms. It's really bad at. So here you see the front's okay, and then the back just a mess. And finally, visualization is it's really powerful in that. So, you know, starting with a point map, a scan of our hillside, placing all the trees, and then having somebody sketch over it, and being able to communicate that within a cute, artsy style, allows us to kind of, you know, it's a lot of fun, and it speeds up some processes. So efficiency is definitely a key player here. Here you see images, renders, able to do now 10 renders with one person instead of, you know, shelling out 5,000 euros per image to get a render like this. So there's a big difference. And then you can even make videos out of it. How cool. So just kind of reflecting on that, AI is an incredibly powerful tool. There seems to be some key areas where it can be really helpful in our architectural field. Part of that is like efficiency, and I think that's maybe the most boring part, but it is something we should be aware of. A part of it is also in the design input side, the creation of new ideas, and I think that's great what you guys are exploring here, for example. But don't forget, are just tools. They're part of this larger set of tools that you have on your tool belt that make you a designer and an architect. Because though this is really fun and really flashy, and you know, you'll get a lot of likes on Instagram, that's great. This is where architecture happens, right? It's this first idea. It's that first sketch. It's those sketches for the fourth quadrant, or the ideas about identity and stuff. It's about thinking. It's about creating stuff that is enjoyed, where people can play, or they can protest, or they can dream, be young, or also grow old in. Thank you.
All right. All right, thanks, Cas. So just a reminder where we are in the day. We will hear a little bit about what we've been doing at Maryland and take an intermission. We'll hear from Curry Hackett, our other speaker, and then we're going to have a moderated discussion and a kind of back and forth Q&A with everyone here. So if you have thoughts or ideas or questions or responses, please write them down. We'll come back to all that for our kind of panel discussion and Q&A. So hold tight on any responses. Thanks again, Cas. That was wonderful. And I'm going to pass it to Michael.
Great. Thank you, Cas, and thanks, Lindsay. We want to take a minute now to describe a little more fully how our research group has engaged AI in the question of how AI might be integrated here at UMD Architecture, specifically in our design studios, but also wanted to pause and just mention the kind of broader context in which we're doing this work, because AI is a question on many people's minds across many disciplines. There's a lot of funding out there for it, and UMD appears to be all in on the question of AI's integration into future education and our lives in general. So if we look, if our group is looking specifically at the question of design and the integration of AI processes in studios, there are other courses within the architecture program that are engaging that as well. I want to name check Professor Human Khaliji's course, AI in Architecture, which is running right now, which is engaged in questions about AI-based design processes, specifically around questions of sustainable strategies. And so he's got a robust set of student work. It's actually going to be on display at the poster session here at the end of the day. So if you'd like to look into what he's doing and whether or not it's a course or a mode of thinking that you might want to get into with him, you can check out those posters. Of course, beyond the architecture program and the National Center for Smart Growth, Catherine Howell and Chester Harvey and Nick Finio are engaged with AI, especially through helping to forecast housing instability and preserve housing affordability. So there's that question on the kind of policy side and amongst planners and at the National Center for Smart Growth as well. And then in the background of all of that, UMD is showing how all in it is on AI through launching the Artificial Intelligence Interdisciplinary Institute at Maryland, or AIM. to serve as a collaborative hub to support faculty research in AI. So that's an institute, that's a building that's coming, that's a hub. It's going to be a kind of center point really for AI initiatives. So just be aware of that here in your kind of early career as architects, that Maryland is looking to become a key player in the question of artificial intelligence, not only in design, but in other disciplines. But let's now come back to how this research group is thinking about AI in our studios. We developed workshops that engaged over 150 students, undergrads and grads. 14 faculty members were involved in a variety of ways this fall. And of course, our 3 graduate assistants were working as well. And so the split between the kind of student engagement occurred largely between the 2 modules that we'll describe a little bit more fully now.
So one of the modules, the building facade design and iteration module, was focused in one of our undergraduate studios. And it was really a workflow that used AI as a tool, text to image based AI as a tool to ideate. So really building on, as Cas described, the rapid iteration idea of using AI in that way. And we really wanted to plug into students' projects and the design process in a way that felt natural with their normal iterative design process. So the students, about midway through their project, they started developing elevation drawings, which is the hand-drawn sketch on the left that was produced for one of their mid-reviews. And then we took that image, working with precedent image, which is the one in the center there, and used text-to-based image generation to create a whole series of rapid iterations, which are shown on the right. So using this as a really quick way to sort of take this hand-drawn sketch and iterate quickly. And we wanted to let it make sure that it worked its way back into the design process. So this was a week-long activity. So after producing those initial iterations, the students then evaluated them and started looking at them based on compositional ideas, the kinds of diagrams that they would typically do in a design studio, looking at proportion and structure and rhythm and guidelines and things like that, and evaluating and studying the facades that were generated so that they could then use those ideas and compositional ideas and bring it back into their design process. So it was a way to sort of work this rapid ideation in a way that was seamless, and allow them to sort of test out these tools and explore. And then the students then took the sort of composite sketch, the diagrams there with the red, brought them back into their design process, and then started looking at how does this fit in with the developed floor plan, massing, building context, things like that.
Great. So what Britt just described was that in 401, one of the key design questions has to do with the development of the facade and its relationship to the larger building, right? That's a kind of core question that's engaged at that level of studio. And so our research team decided that, we were going to develop an AI module that really gets to the heart of that question and enables some new modes of thinking around that. And in the same way, in Module 2, in which we were engaged with Architecture 403, which is a advanced level undergraduate design studio, the core question there has to do with the integration of buildings and landscapes. And so again, our thought was, well, we need to develop an exercise here that's AI-based that really gets to the heart of that question and enables some new thinking and new drawings and new processes that interrogate that question of building and landscape integration. And so specifically, we were asking students to use perspective as a tool of ideation. In our estimation, perspective often comes too late in the game in terms of a design project, that it's used to demonstrate design ideas that have already been fleshed out through plan and section, and it's just a render. It's just an output of ideas that came through other processes. And we were trying to invert that model and say, well, let's start with perspective as a tool for ideation and let ideas be generated from there. The question becomes, how do you then unpack a perspective and create design strategies through that? So the work started with a kind of simple digital sketch or a massing. We targeted the module to right at the moment where students had developed a simple massing. They'd been through some building building program questions. They were ready to get into the development of building aesthetics. And so they developed a kind of narrow view of the perspective of a building. And then we were using what we called panoramic perspectives to kind of broaden the view, broaden the context of that building, and start to imagine landscape atmospheres. So not even necessarily landscape design, but the characteristic and the quality of the landscape to the far right and far left, and in the foreground and background of that project. And so using AI-based text-to-image processes, we were creating a range of different possibilities for the character and what we call the atmosphere of the landscape. And crucial to that project, in the same way that Britt demonstrated how AI produced so many images, so many quickly, it's just a wealth of images. But then the question becomes, well, what about the designer and their role in that process? Where our role still becomes critical in that we then have to be able to assess an image like that, assess what AI has given us, and begin to kind of diagram it and unpack what we see here and try to distill and discern strategies that can be then applied in the design work. So AI, again, is kind of fully integrated in a process. It's not an endpoint. It's not delivering answers. It's only, frankly, prompting more questions as we prompt it. So we wanted to offer these metrics because we found they were striking and interesting, and we want to unpack them here for just 1 minute. In Module 1, in Architecture 401, each student developed 36 building design iterations in the course of a week. There's a lot of work on the wall, and you saw some images of it kind of wallpapering the great space. In Module 2, each student developed 6 building design iterations and 4 landscape design. But when you add it all up with 150 students, they developed close to 3,500 iterations over the course of a week, right? But let's think about that metric, right? That metric can be problematic. It's interesting, but also problematic, because is the goal to just create an immense amount of something? Not necessarily, right? The question of quality certainly has to come in. And just like when you're working with hands, sometimes the output from AI can be something you don't want or need, right? A lot of it you can scrap almost immediately because it doesn't fit. You can discern already as a designer that it's not there. But the ability to rapidly iterate, to create so many options and ideas and have them on the table so that you as a designer can then assess them and go through the practice of discerning, well, why this and not that? What is it about this one that's lacking in this one? Or, wow, here's something I had been training my thought a certain way, and now here's an idea out from left field that has just is going to sweep my thinking off in a different direction if I allow it to. That's the amazing part of having so many options on the table that you're bound to get crap, for lack of a better word, and also stuff that are unexpected and stuff that can be really right down the middle and helping you along with the track that you're already on. So we find that the sheer volume of iteration that comes through this practice can be helpful, can be problematic, it can be everything. And it excites us because it feels like it's making the design process more robust. So we want to throw that out there and have you guys think about that, about the benefit of that, the problems with that. We want to hear from you more about that. And again, as Lindsay mentioned, hopefully, after we hear from Curry, we're going to have Lindsay and Curry and Cas sit at the table here, have a discussion, but also hear from you all with questions and ideas. And we're going to engage a lot of these topics more fully. But you know what we need to do now? We need to take a break. We've been sitting and talking, listening. So we're going to take, how long is our break going to be, guys? We come back at 3:40, I hear. So that's a 20-minute break. Yeah. Oh, look at this. We're right on time. When you come back, we're going to hear from Curry Hackett. And he's going to speak to how he's using AI and thinking about AI. So please be prompt. 3:40, we'll see you back here.
That works. Welcome back. Welcome back for the second half of our AI and Design Thinking Symposium. We're now going to continue the conversation with a talk from Curry Hackett. And then, as has been mentioned, there's going to be an opportunity for moderated discussion between our two lectures and an opportunity to ask some questions. Curry J. Hackett is a multimedia artist, designer, and educator. His practice, Wayside, looks to undertold histories to inspire meaningful public works and critical research. Recently, Curry has been experimenting with artificial intelligence tools with which he braids Black aesthetics, kinships with nature, and pop culture to imagine surreal scenes of Black joy. This work has been featured widely, most notably in Bloomberg, which is where I first came across his work, Oculus and Architect Magazine, and exhibited at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and in downtown Brooklyn. His ongoing research and exhibition series, titled Drylongso, explores relationships between Blackness, Southernness, geography, and land. This project has received funding from the Graham Foundation, Journal of Architectural Education, Washington Project for the Arts, and Harvard GSD's Drucker Prize Traveling Fellowship. We are thrilled to have Curry join us this afternoon. Please welcome me in joining Curry Hackett.
Good afternoon. You want to hear me okay? Yes. Great. Thanks so much for the gracious introduction. And I lived in DC for 12 years. I went to Howard, taught at Howard, so it's always great to be back. It's always great to be back in the DMV. So this is doubly special in that way. Today I'll talk quite a bit about sort of where I'm from and how that structured my thinking throughout my practice. I'll talk a bit about the projects and stuff that have kind of led to kind of thinking and framing for me and how I've encountered AI visual tools. And then at the end, I'll share some, hopefully it'll all kind of come full circle and you'll kind of understand like sort of the through lines through my practice, through my teaching, or through my research. As you mentioned in the introduction, my practice is called Wayside. The story behind that is, what a wayside is really just the kind of strip of land that runs alongside a road or a railroad track, which is actually what I had in mind when I named the practice. And that's really sort of, for me, a reminder to kind of think about spaces and stories and people that find themselves sort of in between or on the edge. Sometimes I say it's for me, it's a reminder to kind of celebrate the marginal, the marginalized, or that's just the so-called marginal, the so-called marginalized, and the margin itself. So I often talk, amongst my friends and more recently, even to my sister, about what it means to be kind of in between disciplines, in between moments, both the past and the present and the future. Even geographically in between. Sometimes I've been hopping around to a few different cities over the last few years, and find myself currently in New York. But again, DC is sort of my chosen and second home. I'll kind of start with where I grew up and some of the in-betweens that structure that place, in my view. So I grew up in Southern Virginia in a small town called Farmville. That's the actual name of the town. It is, if you've been to Richmond, it's about an hour outside of Richmond, maybe about 3 hours from here. Farmville is sort of situated in the Piedmont region, which is sort of sandwiched between the Appalachian Mountain Range and the Tidewater region, right? It's sort of characterized by the hills that we see here on campus, right? It's rich red clay soil. Those that have ever kind of seen an anthill in this part of the country, you've seen how red the soil can get. And so this is a region, I think, that stitches together quite a few different geographies, histories, people. Of course, I'll zoom in here in this area here, just outside of Farmville, but we've got Richmond here to the right, sort of to the east, Appomattox, Lynchburg, the sort of gateway to Appalachia along the west. And then in the middle, we've got Farmville, sort of almost equidistant between the two. And so, of course, Appomattox, known for obviously the end of the American Civil War. And then we got Richmond, which was obviously the former capital of the Confederacy, and it's this kind of complicated town. We've got it's a place that loves a monument, right? We've got on the one hand, we've got an avenue that celebrates Robert E. Lee, one of the guys in this image, and at the other end, we've got Arthur Ashe, right? So it's a really interesting. Richmond is a fascinating city in the way that it's able to, or in some ways not able to, kind of hold all these different histories in context with each other. And then in the middle, Farmville or Prince Edward County actually was one of the 5 cases that formed the Brown versus Board Supreme Court case. And that was largely because of several student protests and the condition and even the opening and the funding of the public school system there. The board of directors of the county at one point decided to defund the school entirely for 5 years to avoid integration. They would rather have a segregated system than fund the public school system, right? So there's like all of these things kind of swirling around. Virginia, we've got Revolutionary War history, Civil War history, civil rights history. All of these things kind of collapse along this corridor between Richmond and Appomattox. But I think for me, there's a latent kind of imperative here, which is to think about ways that sort of Black folks sort of live in abundance in some ways that are, you could argue, are kind of offering correctives to the colonial project. But I tend to situate my practice around this idea that we can be unconcerned with whiteness, and that's okay too. There's sort of devices and mediums and tactics that we can use that are kind of affirming our own agency and identity. And that's kind of what the whole project of Wayside, I would say, is about. So this photo here is a land, some farmland just outside of Farmville, an even smaller dot in the map called Prospect, Virginia. There's about 100 acres of farmland that my family has owned since the 19th century or so. We've literally had the land so long, I haven't found someone that knows how we got it. And so we've been stewarding this land for all this time. I've got plenty of stories of helping my uncles kind of feed chickens, stories of growing tobacco, growing sorghum, all these things. So this is a place that I would say before I had the words, before I had the vocabulary of thinking about this notion of landscape and geography. For me, this is a place of stewardship, of kinship, of imagination, of ingenuity, of memory. And I don't know, for me, it's always great to kind of pay homage to this place and really lift this up as a central sort of theme throughout my work. This place is also what I would consider, and I think others would consider, a kind of Black landscape. So this is, I would define this as a place that is sort of built for and by and stewarded with Black folks, such that we can kind of exact our agency. I think these are also places that you can think of actually Howard, or you can think of as a Black landscape, right? I don't even know if that's the right direction. These are places that I think tend to have different relationships with time, and I think also particularly have different relationships with space, right? I think are less concerned with in and out, sort of hard encodings between public and private, hard encoding between, or even what defines an individual versus a collective space. I think all of those things kind of get re-encoded and kind of collapsed in these fun and probably unruly ways. And this is like, for me, it's a really, I think, critical sort of start point for my work. Because it blends together. It's also, I would say, radically non-disciplinary, or maybe post-disciplinary, I don't know. Because we can talk about critical geography, we can talk about history, we can talk about architecture. All of these things kind of are engaged and engaging these spaces that I consider the Black landscape. I'm reminded of, in sort of the spirit of the Black landscape, I'm reminded of this quote by Octavia Butler. And she says, you got to make your own worlds, and you got to write yourself in, right? Whether or not you were the greater society or not, you got to write yourself in. And this kind of thinking, I would say, sort of initially starts to kind of inform my teaching of architecture. Some of my early sort of teaching work. This was through the Dark Matter U network, co-taught with my friend Jaleesa Bloomberg at Carleton University in Ottawa. This is an option studio in which we were looking at these tropes of Black performance throughout the Black Atlantic. Jaleesa is coming from a Panamanian and Jamaican context. And so we just said, like, this is a set of performances that we want to, like, how do we, through an architecture studio, legitimize these tropes as sort of areas worthy of study or things worth studying? And then invited the students to invent these sort of notational systems using, conventions that we're already kind of used to in this room to try to understand I would say, the social and spatial potential of the so-called mundane, the so-called quotidian. In this case, Lorraine was looking at double Dutch, right? I would say this, that kind of the spirit that Octavia is getting at is also shaping my research. So, they mentioned earlier this project that's ongoing called Dry Long So, which basically is a Gullah-derived term that means same old or everyday or ordinary. This is sort of a project that really takes that tries to take stock of everyday Black life in the rural South. So I, for this project, started off as a research project, ended up as an exhibition in which I called several women in my family that all grew up on or near that land that I mentioned in the beginning, and just kind of asked them and sort of, interviewing sounds maybe too clinical, but just kind of asked them questions about what it meant to grow up on or near that land, and what it meant for them as mothers, what it meant for them as educators, daughters, cousins, archivists, cooks, et cetera. And kind of took those conversations, transferred them to, in a kind of ironic way, transferred them to an analog medium, in this case, cassette tape, and situated them around this kind of dining room, library-esque table. Right, so really trying to using the gallery as a staging of an archive, and also trying to think of different ways of writing ourselves into the record, right, the historical record, and also kind of questioning the kind of how we the mediums by which and the tactics by which we tell these kinds of stories. And then just invite folks in to kind of listen to these narratives and sort of find relationships. Relevance to their own lives, right? So in all these 9 stories, even though they're all from women that grew up in and around Farmville, there's these sort of themes of family and community and care and maintenance. So that's right along. So, and then a little bit more recently, this is a sculptural installation that just opened this past spring on Harvard's campus at the Radcliffe Institute. It's called Hold. And so it's telling a different story. I would say it's leaning more so into a kind of formal language and a material language to tell a story. And also, I think similar to the Richmond is trying to put sort of really difficult and hopefully more triumphant histories sort of in direct in confrontation with each other. So Hold is a double entendre. It's actually referencing the cargo hold of the slave ship, but it's also talking about the various ways that Black folks kind of hold each other together, hold each other down, so to speak. So this is an installation that you would encounter from across the yard, and you would see it kind of just this flat, translucent wall that apparently prevents you from getting into something that's behind. But then as you start to circle around the installation, you can kind of see the hull of the cargo hold there kind of presenting itself to you and peeling away from itself. And we created this sort of outdoor room for folks to gather. I should have shown photos of the opening actually, because it looks a lot more lively. It doesn't seem as like something that you would see in Design like it does in this photo. But we were really interested in creating something that would enable sort of unstructured gathering, unstructured lingering. And it's also accompanied by a soundscape that plays every day at sunset. So this is a soundscape that's playing currently, in which I am collaging field recordings from the Charles River that runs alongside Boston and Cambridge, with a conversation with my mom about her baptism in a creek in Virginia. Right. So again, like just kind of playing with different ways. I'll play out. I can skip along here. Let's see. The pile driver that I pitched down and that trench paper. Gonna mess it up. Anyway. And I grew up. Anyway, yeah. So that's just one. Again, just kind of the last few years has really been this kind of project of thinking through various mediums, various scales, various settings for how we tell stories about Blackness and those in the relationship with land. This last project I'll share before I talk more sort of directly about how I've been encountering artificial intelligence tools is actually work that came out of a course that I took while in grad school at the GSD. This was a really beautiful course that was taught by Danielle Choi. She's in the landscape department there. It was called Environmental Histories and Archive Landscapes, in which we were sort of invited to go into or identify one of the tens of thousands of collections on campus across one of the scores of libraries there, and find and physically handle, that's my hand, physically handle the collection, right? And try to sort of find ways, I think similar to that teaching exercise earlier, find ways of kind of spatializing and indexing the collection, and try to push it beyond, sort of offer something beyond the kind of prosaic description that's often in the finding aid, right? I actually stumbled on a set of letters that was written by back and forth by the Carter family. The Carter family, some of the members of which were actually enslaved on a plantation in Gloucester, and the mother and one of her sons were writing to one of the freed son in Richmond. And so obviously because of it just felt really close to home. It was something that I wanted to study further. And as I kind of started riffing through the letters, many of these letters predated the Civil War, obviously. Created a sociogram to kind of understand who was writing to whom. Again, trying to like really push how we archive, and maybe even challenge an institution like Harvard that challenge the ethics of an institution like them having a collection like this, and also sort of shed light on what's missing from the description, the way we describe archival collections, right? I remember reading through the letters, and at one point was really struck that Polly, the mother, mentioned her master by name. So, it's just really striking to be handling these letters with my bare hands, and also sitting with how ordinary the letters were, even though these were, written by people who were doing sort of enslaved labor in Richmond. In Gloucester. At a certain moment, for the final project, we were invited to create what she called a forgery of something that could have been in the collection that wasn't. And the more I handled the paper, the more I began to sit with the idea or the fact that many of these letters would have been written illegally. They were probably written through surrogates, but it was illegal for Black people to read and write before the end of the Civil War, right? And so the act of writing that we consider maybe simple and apolitical now would have come with great risk at this time. And so therefore, that's true, then therefore the paper itself becomes this kind of politicized medium, in my view. And so I asked this sort of speculative question, like how were Black folks writing, getting access to stationery at this time? Was there a history or tradition of Black folks making their own paper? And if so, what would that look like? And so for my forgery, I actually ended up trying my hand at making paper out of things that Black folks might have had on hand. In this case, collard greens, okra, and mugwort. And here's the final result, right? So there's this arc of me in the archive in this frankly inaccessible space at this historically privileged institution, physically handling the historical record, right? And then we end with this project that is, I would say, plausible. Sometimes I'll say extra incremental, or this kind of day after tomorrow sort of flavor of futurism, right? There's a speculation, it's speculative, but it's not really, right? This could happen, or could have happened. City Hartman refers to this kind of, I think we refer to this kind of thing as critical fabulation, sort of telling stories and retelling histories in ways that are kind of serve us in the present, and are kind of liberatory and reparative in that way. I really love how Badia Hadlagardi frames this in her book Afro-Nostalgia. She says, while historical nostalgia in its more conventional form leaves little in the way of romantic recall for the African descendant, Afro-Nostalgia calls for its own redemptive remembrances, rooted in the imaginative landscape of the historical and the pleasure-seeking desires of the present. And so I think this kind of thinking of just kind of filling in the gaps of the historical record, even if that means we allow ourselves to be, silly or ironic or nostalgic, that has a value and has work that it does a kind of work that can serve us in the present. Before I read Afro-Nostalgia, I think I was sort of encountering AI tools in that same light. Last spring or so, I started sort of asking similar questions. What would my relationship with AI be? as someone that works and thinks in this way. And so I started playing with Midjourney, which is a text to image AI model. And just sort of thinking about like what sort of, again, so-called mundane sort of features of the Southern landscape that I grew up with can I amplify and sort of transplant into uncanny and surreal settings. So if you're in the rural South, for instance, this is something that is pretty common. You know, bathtubs, toilets, sinks are often repurposed as planters. So you can see that this is just erupting with prickly pear. Here, this is from the farmland in Virginia. But with Midjourney, like I was like, well, what if this was not just this kind of sort of obscure trope that you see in the rural South, but is actually something that I think I used Harlem in the prompt here, right? So again, taking something that's, you know, I allow myself to be, to suspend belief a bit. But again, this is something that could happen, I think, maybe tomorrow, or I could see happening today. And another example, using Midjourney again, this is some red clay from that farmland. It's actually this red, you know, for those that don't believe me. And I've always wondered why red clay wasn't used more imaginatively in the South beyond just brick. But with Midjourney, we can kind of imagine what if kids were using it in this kind of playful, I think I call them playscapes in the prompt. Or maybe I post-rationalized that. Yeah. So that's just, you know, just a few sort of ideas or for using a tool in this way, just kind of just trying to amend my own imagination, basically. I would say after pretty quickly got somewhat tired of just kind of throwing kind of images right out of Midjourney sort of onto Instagram, let's say, as provocations, and start thinking, well, what other workflows can I develop using tools like this? And found myself actually reverting back to something that I was really familiar with, which was collage, which I think in some ways works it makes a lot of sense or feels really compatible with a neural network, because all they do is, at their essence, is they're kind of like putting things together that don't seem like they belong. Right, they're kind of identifying patterns and making predictions, and you may get something wonky at the end. And so I did something, you know, try to experiment with what that could look like. This is a project called Ugly Beauties, which is speculating on Black relationships with plants, in particular weeds. And ended up collaging. So this is actually not one continuous image. This is 5 separate images that are composited manually in Photoshop and to create one image. And then also starting to think about like, well, what does it mean to take these projects, these images out of the digital realm? And so this was actually hung as a 50-foot long tapestry in a public plaza in downtown Brooklyn. This was early this spring. So, you know, like I think this is a very short arc, right? This is this spring. And so I'm still, you know, I'm really excited about the next couple of years as these tools sort of develop. And, you know, I guess on that end, I'll share sort of a sequel that I did, like an animated sequel with OpenAI, partnered with a gallery that I collaborated with earlier in New York, and offered us access to Sora, which is their text to video model. So this is sort of an animated sequel to the 2D work. This is again like open, you know, Ugly Beauties opened in March. This video, this was offered to us this past fall, so that you can just kind of see how quickly the technology is advancing. This is a few different prompts and then collage manually in Premiere. Okay. And so why work in this way? Why use these tools? What's the deal? I really love Linda Donia-Rebez, who's I believe a Senegalese artist, who's using AI and building her own models, training her own models in a way that I think is really critical. And I love her approach to like why, you know, this using these tools in this way. And when she says, I continue to incorporate AI in my practice because I'm afraid that if I don't, everything about me and where I come from will be erased from the digital memory of the world. And for me, I interpreted that as like as these tools start to scrape the internet for their data sets. At a certain point, we're going to end up with a critical mass of the internet actually being AI generated imagery. So you have robots making images for robots, so to speak. And if there's a dearth of like, I would say, productive or even positive imagery that is depicting Black folks or other marginalized groups, that we will have this runaway effect, basically. So there's actually a case to be made that this way of working is doing some really, I'd say radical work in sort of ensuring a future in the historical record. I'll just share. This is another Sora video here. This is me kind of thinking through sort of reimagining the history of tobacco and in my family's farmland. But I think as it kind of come full circle and start to think about how AI can start to be situated within a broader set of processes. For me, it's like if I started here, actually, this is an idea of like, what if tobacco was a kind of architectural material? So if tobacco was actually just cured and draped on the facades of buildings, I think I used Richmond in the prompt. What if we actually made that real? And so this is actually hanging currently on view at the Cooper Hewitt Design Triennial in the Smithsonian Design Triennial in New York. So there's a small gallery on the second level that's hung 250 pounds of real tobacco, sourced or farmed in PA by Amish farmers and sourced from a vendor in Virginia, and then kind of punctuated with a mixture of AI generated artifacts as well as archival work. For instance, I had my mother, who's a visual artist. She painted this painting here on the right. Those are my skillets from my own kitchen. I've cooked in 4 out of 5 of these, yeah. This is the left is an AI generated image that's been converted to woven textile, right? So really thinking, imaginatively about how these processes, I think similar to Cas's work, is kind of how does this stuff live outside of the digital world. I just love how the model hallucinated this kind of tobacco head wrap onto her. And then a video that I created using a mixture of AI and archival imagery. Made some green screen cameos there. This is the video. And this is also manually comped in Adobe Premiere to make it look like it's changing channels and things like that. That's all manual glitches. I made this green screen in my office. And so I'll just wrap with, some audio that I'll share from that Dry Long So project, the exhibit with the listening stations. I'll share about 50 seconds of audio from a conversation with my mother, and which I think she sort of I think really powerfully sort of sums up like what's at stake for me and obviously what's at stake for her, and as her role as a kin keeper, as an artist, and I would say that's I would echo that in my own work. Let's start here.
Jumping in a mud hole and that mud oozing up through your toes, eating the dirt. Oh, it tasted so good.
Eating the dirt.
I was surprised. I'd never heard of it.
Dirt was good, man. Especially after it burned.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Yeah, eating some dirt was good. All of that is who I am and what I am and what I continue to look forward to continue to become and to be. Because it's not over. It's not over until it's all said and done. I'm still growing and I'm still learning.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, still growing, still learning, and I still want to instill things in you and instill things in Carol and share so that you all won't forget.
Thank you all. You.
All right, thanks, Curry. That was wonderful. We are going to have a little bit of a conversation back and forth just to start, and then we'll be opening it up to questions and comments and observations from everyone. So please be prepared to jump in. I'll start with a few observations I had about the talks. I'll say first, there was way less AI than I expected in the talks, less kind of technology, nuts and bolts, and kind of AI affirmative forward conversation. Cass, you talked a lot about your firm context and the agenda and kind of grounding in conceptual narrative. And Curry, yours is, well, we just heard your talk, but the kind of personal context, historical, geographical context. And both you guys grounded your talk so much more, I think, in the human than in the AI. And I think, like, based on, this title that's enormous behind me, I sort of anticipated a little more of an affirmative AI tone, but what's kind of amazing is that the conversation that you guys, I think, started is much more human affirmative than maybe kind of a blind faith or blind optimism only in AI as such, but really how do people engage with it? What do we take out of it? And one of the questions I had written down earlier in just thinking about what we were going to talk about that I didn't really think we would get to, or I didn't care that much about, but now seems so central, is what can't AI do? And it can't do a hand sketch. It can make something that looks like a hand sketch, but it can't sketch by hand. It can't enjoy a view or occupy a balcony in the wrong or the right way. It can't steward land or touch soil, can't have a personal family context or history, which is kind of an amazing way to have an AI symposium, is to talk about ourselves as people, and then how this tool kind of percolates in and amplifies what we already do. So I think that's kind of my initial observation. I thought it was going to be much more heavy AI, and it was much more heavy other amazing work, and then AI is kind of a background. So we can start there, or I can just keep going. Yeah, take these out, by the way.
Oh, that works.
Is that okay? Okay, great. I mean, I think that is right. Why, if I can ask you a counter question?
Yeah.
Which is, why were you surprised?
I think, well, as we talked about earlier, we'd interviewed both you over the summer, and we were in a conversation, and I listened to the conversation you had, and I think I was sort of bridging from our research interviews with you both that were so much more about, we're just figuring out what this tool is and how we want to use it in the school. And so what are you doing and how are you using it and how are you thinking about these things? So maybe that's why. And I loved these talks as a way to bring us out of some of that too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember some of the answers. I remember there was one in particular where I took a course. It was like race and the age of AI, and which the professor was very, very like let's just just figure this thing out. Like, let's write an essay, make ChatGPT write the same essay, write a reflection on the ChatGPT essay. Like there's definitely, I could see a set of talks that are just focusing almost on like how to use AI in a more sort of where the AI is more centrally sort of situated in the conversation. But I feel like for me, this is just a more interesting way of working. It's also just like a more natural way of like, it's hard for me actually to keep up at this point with what the tools that are coming out. And so I just find myself sort of in a kind of organic way, just incorporating it into workflows that are already familiar to me. And if that's true, then like my subjectivity is always going to be present in both the workflow, the input, and the output, right? So that's kind of where I am. But I mean, I think as we're seeing, you know, you also need plenty of folks that are working in the belly of the beast, right? That are actively, you know, shaping, you know, more equitable models, that are shaping new workflows, new use cases. Yeah, I think you kind of need both. And I think if we're talking about architecture, like we always have to, I would say that you got to start with the human condition first, and then think about like how the AI sort of dovetails into that, or yeah.
I think you answered it. Yeah.
Yeah, you might have.
I think. So you wondered why our
Classic,
talks
think a
weren't.
little closer.
You wondered why our talks weren't more about AI, and it feels like.
I was surprised by how you centered kind of other things.
I think it's also kind of what I went over really quick was when you do look online and you're trying to find this discussion that's happening, it's done by so many people trying to get clicks and trying to like find you and make you excited, or AI sucks, it's horrible, it's destroying this, or it's making that great. And then what both of us kind of really clearly showed is it's there, it's cool, it's not so life-changing, maybe it is, we don't know yet. It's a little bit more, that's also nice, the format is like an hour or 40 minutes exactly, and so you have a bit more time to kind of, you know, take the time with it and discuss it like a human in within its real context, right?
So I think the flip of what you talked about is what can't AI do, which is human, and maybe the flip question is what can AI do better than us? What is AI good at? And then how do you guys feel that lets us be more human, or lets us be better architects, or lets us be better designers? How can we leverage the tool to work for us? And
What are we talking about? What is AI? What does that mean for you?
I think, well, maybe I'll ask you.
I think it's all of these, because basically what we've seen now is that with these machine learning tools, which are completely just based on these heuristics, where I've seen after 3 blue pixels, there's a red one. So if I'm generating this, I'll do that again, and I'll do that again. And by affirming its decisions and kind of saying, hey, that's great, what you're doing, it just keeps doing that over and over again. And recently we've had so much computing power that we're able to kind of do that on such a scale that we're able to create these images. But it's no more than that. It's just filling in the blue pixel after the red one consistently. And that's what it does with ChatGPT and with these image things, which is also going to be its limit in critical thinking. Because how many things can you just do by rules of thumb in your life? Well, many, but not everything. So that's also where the limits will be, and what AI can't do, I think.
So then what do you think, what in architecture, either architectural education or practice or research, what can't we do by rules of thumb in architecture? What does it leave us time to do you think, better, at least?
In the future, I think it's going to be able to do everything just as well as we can do it, and better than most people can do it, I think. But if we're looking at the right now, it's exactly what you mentioned. It's that human aspect, or the thing that was really emphasized in your story. It's where it's who you are, where you're coming from, what context you're thinking out of, what context you're designing for and in. So all of those things, it just doesn't have access to, and it can't integrate into its solution. And it only thinks in one dimension. So text thinks in text, image thinks in image. And then you have these weird 3D things which don't work, but it's also not, it's just stuck in its own heuristical mindset, or I don't know how to say that nicely.
I will add though, I think something that I am excited about, I think the next step for me is getting, I think similar to how you all are using it in the office, like building your own models and LoRa's and things, like is like, yeah, starting to train so that I'm operating within my own kind of universe. And for better or for worse, I mean, I think that's that's a really powerful way of being able to work and kind of having your own kind of walled garden that is like an amendment or even a kind of sister to your own imagination. I don't know what the equivalent of that is in the real world. And I think also just the synthetic capabilities of it, right? So you can, I don't know if you all know King Wallonius. He did the he did the original like BBL Drizzy sample that Metro Boom. Yeah, he moved to Harlem, so we're like trying to be buddies now. I look at his work and a couple of others that are experimenting with AI like sound and AI music, and like that is a crazy world because you can synthesize things, like you can take like a recording of rain and a recording of the human voice, and you can like ask AI to do the scribble thing that you had in your diagram, and kind of like you end up shoehorning certain character or patterns of the acoustic signal from the human voice into the rain signal. And so you can get this weird rain human voice hybrid that you would never be able to, I shouldn't say never, but probably not be able to, maybe literally probably not be able to synthesize natively. And I think that is like, that's like a whole realm of creativity that I don't even know what to do with, right? So I'm really excited for, and you could probably extend that to the formal or the graphic. Yeah, I think that's what's potentially, that's really exciting for me as a designer, as a thinker, artist. Yeah.
And it stays relevant with if you keep it within this dimension of noise or in text, but once you bring it to real architecture, like way too complicated for it right now.
What gets
For AI to generate something that works on a detail, acoustic, all of that stuff, it just doesn't have the energy for that. No, it can't do it.
well, and Cas, you
What
were
I'd want it to do.
yeah. What I was going to say is you were just saying that you think eventually it will do everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Then what do you hope your role is in a project at that time?
Well, you become more of a curator in a sense, which I think that's also more what you're doing already within your role. You're curating what's relevant and not so much drawing the drawing. I also tell the people on my team, like, it doesn't matter if your drawing is really ugly or really great. We just need to get it clear and communicate it to a point that we can move on with our process. Because as architects, you're not learning how to draw per se, but it's learning about how to create a building or to create a space, So I want to make sure we focus on the right stuff in our workflows as well, which AI can really help us with. It's good. It's good. We were talking. We would be against her in this talk. We're already kind of physically getting there, so it's good.
Yes, we don't have any conflict yet. Stop trying to create it.
I disagree with that, actually.
Good. Check the box. So maybe that's a good moment to open it up. Do we have anyone that wants to throw in a question? Yeah.
So I have a question for Mr. Hackett. You were talking about the idea of sort of like these Gen AI models. They're like feeding off of Gen AI in the future. How do you feel about that? And how do you feel about the fact that like you could just be left out of that? You could miss the boat.
So I'll say it back real quick just because we're on Zoom and then we'll work the microphones. So the question was about the future AI images being created off of other AI images and kind of the snowball effect of that, to summarize quickly.
Yeah, I think that for me, it raises the stakes of the work. It also helps me to just kind of focus on that potentially as maybe a direct kind of impact of the work that, or I should say, in the ways that I can control it, the ways that I can have impact. And for me, that's satisfying because like I know that I'm not like I'm so far down as in this sort of downstream as a user that I am skeptical that I'll be able to have impact on, let's say, the environmental causes that these models are having right now, labor implications. We got folks in the African continent that are labeling data sets for $2 an hour. Like, I am wary of those impacts, and I'm also like, this work also is as is that me? This work is also probably as relevant, right? Or will be in the future as we start to figure out these like macroeconomic, these macro outputs or impacts of these large models that require more and more and more computing power. For me, then the soft issues then sort of emerge as something that we need to be engaging directly with. And I also feel like that this way of working is potentially a way of holding the corporations that that do or maybe don't moderate these models to kind of hold those entities accountable. So again, this is me as a human working with these tools in the kind of only way that I know how is for me like the kind of the one way that I feel can be perhaps most impactful. Yeah, I don't know. I think that the analogy maybe would be like, sure, I could take a couple less flights a year, but like if Taylor Swift is going to be like, doing her thing in her jet, like like how to I'm just yeah, again, I'm just trying to act it within the sort of way that I think I could see other creatives kind of continuing to work in this way and hopefully that maximizes impact in that way.
I like what you say about like holding the firms accountable in a way, but I kind of disagree with that. I think especially within this AI field, it's open source is huge. Everybody can have an impact and create a model that'll be downloaded by thousands of people and used. And I think that's also a responsibility the educators and students have as to grab onto that stuff and do train your own model. I mean, it's super easy. Just it's 3 YouTube videos away, and then you can do it. And do it in a way that's where you see a relevant subject missing, like something you're touching on very clearly. Train a model on diversity or on what I trained one on vernacular architecture because I saw we couldn't generate anything locally inspired and it didn't have impact on what we were doing. So yeah, grab onto it. The big corporations are just doing it for money, and that's fine for them. But we as architects are responsible that these tools are used in a way that we are happy with, right? And it's really easy to do it. It's super easy. So please do it.
Yeah. There's a mic coming. Yeah. Test.
Yeah. Hey, good afternoon. I'm a senior, so hopefully soon I get into the workforce. And one lesson that I remember learning in one of my history classes was after orthographics was introduced to architecture, everything became very rectilinear. After CAD got introduced to architecture, suddenly facades were super flat and just full of lines. Do you think there's a dystopian future where all buildings are made out of AI, now no longer human centric? Like currently, you as an architect, you understand the responsibility of making a design for people. But if someone else just wants to make a building, they don't want to pay an architect, but they have this tool that can just make it for them. What's really stopping them? If you, as you say, it's gonna get to the point where it can do all of the jobs. It's should I be learning how to use AI or should I be learning how to design to compete against AI?
Both.
Being a lazy architect is getting easier and easier. You're right. And being a bad architect is also getting, easier. So there will always be bad and lazy architects. That's the truth. But just don't be like them and use it in a responsible way. And be critical and creative. but it's going to happen, right? Nothing you can do about it.
I think embedded when they use tools, there's a bit of a double-edged sword here in that the models are necessarily biased because they're based on finite training sets, right? And that could mean that when you type in some whatever prompt in Midjourney, something that deals with architecture, you're going to get some kind of predictable outcome that's rooted in a certain set of ways of building that we have attributed names for, aka styles. And so you're going to get something that maybe looks like Mies or looks like some, Greco-Roman thing. But I think as AI models are able to get more and more personalized, I would maybe assume or maybe imagine that there's a potential for a kind of hyper splintering where people's aesthetics can kind of get baked into the model, which is very different, I think, than, let's say, AutoCAD, right? Which is really just a way of computerized drafting, so like, I think there's actually a potential, I think, to maybe push back on the word on the dystopian scenario outlining, where there isn't this kind of like latent intractability of kind of orthographic drawing as a primary way of describing a building, right? There might be a completely other thing that someone in this place, maybe even in this room, invents to describe what a space can look and feel like. And so I actually want to think about how it's going to open up, again, those kinds of entry points into architectural expression that probably don't really exist or are more difficult to transcribe with a tool like Rhino and CAD. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. Cameron.
Okay, well, we can do the middle and then Alec on the side and then back to the middle.
Hi, I just have a question about the kind of like sustainability aspect of AI and the environmental aspect, especially for UCAS. I don't know if your firm has had any discussions about the, impacts on the environment, water and electrical in using these. And also, I know you guys are working with your own models now. If you've noticed any differences in your electrical use or how much computing you're using, or if you had discussions around that at all.
So it's a big issue how much electricity we're using for it. But it's hard not to. It's just so good and so powerful. We run everything locally on 2 computers, actually 2 decommissioned render computers from like a few years back, which had like this multi-core thing. So it was really good at rendering this old render beast. And now it's really great at doing AI stuff. But we've discussed it and it seems impossible to avoid. So it's a little bit, it just sucks. But as you see, as we develop also, better results are coming from less, like you can choose the amount of steps that you need to make an image. So normally it was like 35 a while back, or even 80, and now we're down to like 5 or 10 or something like that. So each generation and every time we develop, the amount of computing power also kind of reduces because they're getting more efficient and better. So that's also something to be aware of. I think we're at the worst moment right now for energy use, and it'll only get better.
I've heard the same thing. Basically, like, I think it's hilarious that like nuclear power was this like boogeyman, and suddenly it's like, oh, like why don't we explore nuclear energy to like, to power the computing needs for this industry. So it's kind of funny to see how that's become in vogue. But I think you're touching on the point. What I've heard is actually going to be a self-solving issue. Is like as the models get more efficient, the computing power will go down, and you'll see actually this kind of dip, or at least a plateau. So I don't know. But also, again, I'm not even training my own models quite yet. I'm still operating within these kind of big box corporate models, and I would imagine that if I'm starting to run these like maybe more locally, where I'm not using billions of data points, and maybe there's more like hundreds or thousands.
And you'll save on heating in your house.
That's right.
Because your computer's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I imagine maybe my footprint will go on as my practice kind of evolves.
Great. Yeah.
So I have a question about, you guys talked a lot about the design side. And so as a boring practicing architect, just thinking about the production side and the execution side, like I've definitely read and heard some things about the ability for AI to support kind of reducing the amount of time it takes us to execute, construction documents and things like that. And so I'm really interested in your thoughts about how that plays out, in the future, and perhaps as a way to make architecture more accessible. Our fees are based on hours. If our production was less, and the same thing on the construction side, are there ways that AI can radically transform our practice beyond the design side?
So can you pay your employees less? Is that where you're at with the integration of AI or?
I guess more less about paying them less, but can we produce things faster?
The efficiency gain is like insane.
Yeah.
I've seen my teams shrink significantly, and our production output increased actually. But that's like the sad thing. But the great thing is I've also seen non-native Dutch-speaking architects from Spain or from Italy be able to lead projects in the Netherlands because we've set up tools that they can query Dutch building regulation code documents and double check that. So all at once, an international non-Dutch speaking person can already do quite advanced stuff. So there's a lot of accessibility, like you're saying, is going to be huge, and you don't have to do 10 or 15 or Revit courses to be able to actively work in Revit, because you're just typing it in. Hey, can we change all the bathroom walls in the expensive apartments on the north side to this? And it just does it for you. So I think that's, I don't know if that efficiency gain is going to be huge, and it is already quite big.
I think similar to an answer that I gave to one of the previous questions is like, I'm wondering, like, maybe documentation is not primarily through text and orthographic drawings, right? Like, I'm reminded of a lecture, I think it was Euler and Wu when I was in Tennessee for a year, and they were like they were working on a building, I think, in Taiwan, and they were giving the construction, they were giving the contractor like assembly videos and working in AR to like put these like whatever assembly they had designed together. So, I mean, I wonder, like, similar to, like, again, if we're almost thinking completely out of the paradigm of documentation, traditional documentation, do suddenly we start getting like AI, like, audio instructions or video instructions based on the 3D model that's put in front. I think it could get really weird or fun or crazy. And again, more entry points to how we build and who we build for, maybe.
That also could extend to robotics too, where the directions are going right from the code to the
Computer to computer.
Yeah.
Michael, yeah.
I have a piggyback question. I'm a practicing landscape architect at a small firm in DC, and I sort of have a question about, you're working at a large firm and you have a dedicated person for AI scripting and doing, the AI training. Do you think that that is necessary beyond going through, visualization iterations early on in the ideation phase? I'm kind of at like I hit a wall once it gets past a certain point where, I feel like I basically need to start training models and stuff. And I'm not a coder, I graduated 4 years ago, so I'm still, kind of a lower level and have plenty of work to do. So yeah, I just want your take on it.
Yes. Look, when about 1.5 years ago, I saw it come up. At one point I thought, okay, now it's relevant for us. And I spent about 1.5 months every night working on it until I thought I fully understood it. And that's kind of been the basis of knowledge. So that's about as much as you need. It's so young that it's really easy to gain and enough knowledge to be relevant in the space. So I wouldn't be so worried about it. It's not such a big wall. You just have to no fear it and just go for it and try, just spend some time on it. And you're going to have to, I think it's almost unavoidable.
It's also interesting to, I mean, it's refreshing to see that the AI is actually helping to lower the bar for you to understand AI. So you can ask ChatGPT to code, and it does that quite well. And like, you know, there's tools like Touch Designer. You can like, I've asked ChatGPT to write code so that I could use Touch Designer to then create some crazy, you know, generative visual. So yeah, I mean, I think there is like in the way that we saw like learning through YouTube, I think that kind of structured a lot of our online learning in most of this century. I think it's possible, probable, and it's already happening. I think that you'll see like AI actually, you'll get individualized content. Uh, so again, like it's the entry point. I think that's going to be the name of the game moving forward with these tools. Is like these tools are just going to have a very personalized kind of individual curated educational kind of experience for you to better understand this landscape.
I love the importance that you guys kind of highlighted of ideation with AI, and how you even had that analogy of it being a world where you can reimagine in a way that you can't, like in this tangible like reality. I am wondering what's kind of the pattern or the threshold of bringing the reimagined to life? Because, for example, you were looking at the play spaces, and you also had the biomes in major cities like Kinshasa, which is where my parents were from, so it's cool to see. Um, and the Oasis Towers even came from an idea and a concept that you had that someone just reached out to you to make it happen. So in that world of imagination, like what kind of tips or things have you guys seen to kind of bring what people don't really see as feasible into?
He's like, that's all you. Um, I find that again, I was surprised when I first started using these tools last year. I waited a whole year, kind of on the sideline, by the way, just to like ChatGPT, I think launched in 2022. And I just like, I don't know what this is. I'm just gonna like just see how other folks are doing. And then I kind of jumped in with both feet last spring. And I found that like, and maybe just it's because I tend to work in a very haptic kind of like intuitive way. I found that I was really surprised at how similar the way whether it's the way that I prompt or the way that I curate the images or how I select what I think is a good versus a less good image. All of that I found it was very similar to how I was already accustomed to designing in the first place. So basically just like leaning into my own sense of taste and just allow myself to kind of be surprised and just to sort of acknowledge, acknowledge the knowledge that I have, right, basically. And I think that's also something I would say that I've been telling my students the same thing, just like when you're engaging with these tools, like, would you live there? You know, like, can you see yourself in this place? Which is really like, and in a broader sense, I'm asking, can you see yourself in your work? And so I would say like, you know, the way that I tend to work with these tools is maybe broadly speaking, kind of an invitation to do the same for other folks. That's kind of how I've been encountering these tools in terms of how they amend my own imagination. Oh, is that good? Okay.
Yep, over here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the amazing lecture. I'm wondering about why AI in other fields like healthcare, marketing is developed, but its impact on the architecture is not as much as other fields. Do you think because of the limitation in data set or limitation the architect who can deal with AI?
I think what you're saying is right. Data set is super tough to get because it's trained. If you have good data in is also something good on the output side. Most architecture firms, and ours included, is a mess when it comes to our data. And also our data it comes in various forms. So maybe on the medical field, if you need to work with planning or booking rooms for operations, that's just one Excel sheet of data, and it's not that much more. It doesn't get more complicated than that. And with architecture, it's so much more. We have Excel sheets, 2D images, 3D models, videos, and then you have renders and diagrams and floor plans and sections and details. And that's all comes in. It's just too broad to easily insert into this, as we were talking before, this two-dimensional tool, right? So that's just the biggest limit. that we're facing now. Also, architecture firms really care about their data a lot and aren't always willing to share it with each other. So most of our, we're the same, right? Most of our data is our data, and we're not going to share it with anybody because it's also the ethos, and our whole office is kind of based around that. So
I like that answer.
It also seems to go back to the question about how small offices and big offices interact with AI differently, where a big office has the opportunity to build on its own personal history, and small offices just don't have the capacity of that data. It might be an opportunity for individual practitioners or small offices to collaborate and create sort of parallel.
I think small offices can make way more impact on the AI field if they want to. I think they're just more scared to do it. And because of the initial time investment, but I don't think it's so, I think, yeah, no fear. Like, I don't agree with that at all. I think small offices are way more poised to make an impact. And you see it with some of these small ones who are very focused on AI, and they're making some serious impact because it's also so easy to do that right now. We're so young in the field.
So what's the impact you see that small firms are having that larger firms aren't?
Well, Look X, you guys are working with it. That's also made in collaboration with Tim Fu, who now runs his own small office, right? I think it's 5 people. So is that enough? Right?
But what's the process or the product, or how do you see it actually happening?
How people should make impact right now. I think there's a lot to do. It has a lot to do with training models. And I would be very interested in seeing people train models on synthetic data to, let's say, push for more specific styles in a way, and maybe also allow for more jankiness in the images that are being created and not all this perfection. So I think I would like to see maybe not even everybody try to create these models that aid us in the way we want to use AI. So that's not small office specific, just general.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do it. So just take the time.
I think I'm also hearing that's just like the future of the AI landscape broadly is like, I'm actually, I mentioned I'm trying to get away from using like the large models like Midjourney and start like doing my own models. But I think from a kind of consumer standpoint or mainstream standpoint, what's likely going to happen is you're going to still have those larger models that then get fine-tuned for hyper specific uses. So if you just want one that's going to like create recipes for your family and like take into consideration all of the allergies and preferences of everyone in the house, like you'll be able to have one that does that, and it'll be that you won't be the one that has to train it as well. Like it'll just work, in the words of Steve Jobs. So I think that you're going to have this like very boutique, a lot of boutiques basically of these like tiny but still very powerful models.
I have 2 questions. With the evolvement of AI, how do you deal with the thought that one day it could replace you as a designer and as a firm? And also, how can you bring the emotional or a human side of a design through AI?
So it won't replace us, which is just a nice thought to have, because it never seems to have ever in all of these big developments where people are worried about us being replaced or any occupation being replaced. It just transforms, right? So we go from somebody who's drawing, like that one of those images I showed, like all these people in a big room drawing, they all went to sitting, half of them sitting behind the computer, and then it went to half of them being able and still matching that production. So I don't think it's just your job changes, and curating and defining your own style is going to be way more important. And then you will still be relevant in the world where AI is leading us, but we're also not there yet, and we're not there yet in 5 years or something. And then your second question was about keeping our vision through AI.
Like the emotion aspect of how to show emotion through AI.
I think in the last slides, I kind of showed where you go from this cool AI image to the 3 sketches. I think that's the key of it, where those 3 sketches say so much more about what we do as architects and our vision than the AI image will ever be able to. So I'm not so worried about it.
Yeah. I think we're already seeing in the last couple of years, I think similar to what Cas is saying, like job descriptions that didn't exist even 2 years ago. Like the prompt engineer that pays like $120,000 a year, like that did not exist in 2021. And so it'll be interesting to see, how actually the industry actually, expands to encompass a wider number of skill sets. Even if you look at the job descriptions that some of these AI folks or companies are putting out, the credentials that they're asking for is really fascinating. Like they'll be asking for like someone that has a PhD in heuristics, which is like, or like people that are, have English background and, or, experts in rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, or like experts in neurology, like it's neuroscience. It's really interesting to see which people, but these are positions that before would have only been occupied by folks like I would say firmly in computer science. And now the science part of the computer science industry is getting much wider and much softer, I think, and much blurrier. I think that'll be interesting to see how the folks in this room actually kind of start to enter in that frame, right? The bigger that tent gets, I'm curious to see where does architectural or in design expertise start to kind of play a larger role in the shaping of these companies and models. I think also in terms of like thinking about the, sort of emotion and the sort of softer aspects maybe of the human condition and how we find those locate those in these images. For me, it's actually in the same way that I try to, tell my students, and you might have heard this from professors current and before, like that one drawing doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to do everything, excuse me. Drawings should generally do something. That one drawing doesn't have to do everything, right? You can kind of parse things out and like have clarity. And so I think similarly, like one image doesn't have to do everything. That's why I always tend to post several sets, or even in the exhibit in the museum, like there's like 6 different moments that I'm trying to put all together to kind of render one way of being or kind of the atmosphere of a place. And I think similarly, like it forces us to kind of think about the terms with which we use to describe emotion or emotion. And so like that then in turn sort of shapes like what you use to prompt, the languages that you use to train. I think there's a value in kind of politicizing and biasing and really shaping the model, like using your emotion, right? Figuring out what that is, and describing it, and then using that as a kind of set of parameters to train a model, if that makes sense.
Hi, thank you both for the presentation. As the trajectory of AI continues, the thing that I'm hearing more and more about coming up on the horizon is a move from a model-based system to an agent-based system, that these AIs are essentially going to be able to take on the tasks that we're essentially taking on with our computers. AI is being trained to kind of read computer screens and functionally use computers similar to how we do. Do you see this trajectory in that as AI takes on more and more of our computational roles, are you imagining any form of, say, a manual renaissance that we as the starting point are sent back into the real world to hand sketch, do model making, to essentially generate more tangible content that then is fed into the computational landscape that the AI is essentially populating out more and more?
I see that as I'm hoping that's a likelihood. I could totally see in 10 years where, maybe an album comes out and we're in a world where we can't assume that a given artifact of media, let's say like an album, is 100% human produced. So, I think in the same way that you see on like maybe certain foods, 100% organic, I could totally see in 10, 20 years where there's like 100% human made, where like, where, I mean, it sounds crazy now, but like, 10, 20 years, like that's a short, long time to, for these tools to be out in the world and revolutionizing how we work and create media and consume media. I can, totally, it's already happening with search on the internet. It's already happening with, BBL Drizzy. Yeah, so I think it'll be interesting I'm hoping actually that as these tools get more and more sort of like atmospheric and start shaping the even the most minute everyday sort of interaction with the internet, that there is also like a resurgence of folks whittling and making folk instruments again and weaving by hand. I'm hoping that there's this that sort of operates alongside this hyper kind of digital universe that we're probably barreling towards. I think it'll also be interesting to see even like, is there a backlash towards, is there a resurgence towards even like hand or like manual digital media? And I think similar to, I could see that being really constructive for the reasons that I mentioned during the talk, which is like we then would be inserting human-made content back into the historical record, again, to kind of hopefully kind of break that cycle of machines making media for machines. So I don't know. I think it'd be cool even if it might even be funny if it was like mandated or like somehow a part of the policy that like maybe instead of like maybe community service, instead of like picking up trash on the side of the road, you just have to like make a bunch of drawings by hand and like that goes into the training set. So I don't know. I think things are going to get really weird. Actually, is what I'm saying. And I'm excited to see how the human hand plays a role in that weirdness.
I agree. The AI future is way more human in a way, which is nice. It's also when I was driving, I was like, I want to talk to my Google Maps, like, hey, why are we going this way and why not that way? Or can we go? What if I go here? Does that help? Like, just we can't yet, but I think it's going to be way more human. Yeah, nice.
It's a nice place to sort of conclude where we started with. How can AI help us be more human? Thank you, Cas, and thank you, Curry, for your talks and for answering your questions. For our questions. So a few notes really quick. First, if you're in the kind of Maryland community, this work will continue to happen. So if you're interested in these topics, please get in touch with Britt and Michael and myself. We're going to be attending conferences, and we're going to be continuing to work on how we think about AI and design thinking in studio. And shortly we'll transition to the great space. If you're not familiar with our building, it's out and to the right. For a poster session and reception, we invited all of the kind of stakeholders, all the constituencies in MAP, faculty, staff, and students to submit posters. So it's a showcase of all the different ways AI is being used in the modules we launched, but also in other places and other programs. So thank you again, Curry and Cas, and please join us in the great space.